Okay, the recording has started, and this is the October 15th, 2019 Crossplane community meeting. We are in the middle of the 0.4 milestone. We released 0.3 I think about a month ago now, and we are moving towards more often, more frequent releases of the Crossplane software. So we are working on 0.4, and we'll talk a little bit more about the schedule later on here. But I think we can look kind of at a high level here, what some of the interesting things are that we're focusing on for 0.4. So I have a couple useful links here in the document. We're not going to go through like every single issue on the board or anything like that, but these are just helpful links to help keep up to date or on the status of the project and where we are and what we're working on. So these are the 0.4, the epics that we have that are filtered by 0.4. I think that some of these we're getting started on in 0.4, but will not necessarily be completely delivered upon. But a couple of the important ones that we're really focusing on is, and we can dive into some more details later on in the community section, but the support to integrate with Rook and generally other on-premises operator-based Kubernetes solutions. Dan has started the work on that and has made a lot of good progress, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's a big deliverable or a high-profile feature for 0.4 that's making good progress. And then the general work here around what we want to, or what we need to do to improve our release process and improve our ability to actually have releases go out on a more monthly basis is something we're spending a lot of time on as well.
Jared, could you refresh the page? I think the V1 beta 1 wasn't included in the
Oh, yep, there we go. Cool. Yes, and so yeah, that's something that Marfik is working on right now as well, is that we want to get to a stable place with our APIs and our experience there so that people can start taking a dependency on Crossplane and have a bit more assurances about the stability and ease of use across versions there. So Marfik's doing some good work at driving the shape of our API, the metadata, the meta model, et cetera, to get to a little bit more stability in some of our controllers and our types there. So that's just a general look at some of the epics that are being worked on. And then we have the links to the boards here in the document as well, the agenda document. This is I believe, updated planning document that kind of helps give you an overall high-level view of what are the objectives that we're trying to deliver on, and like some links to the issues for them as well. This is not in a strict top to bottom prioritization order, but more themed a little bit. So like these are the issues that will help be able to move towards production usage for consumers or the community of Crossplane. And yeah, so these will have links to each one of the high-level epics there. And basically all of these are actively being made, we're making progress on all of these right now, basically. And so this is a useful document in terms of being able to see the high-level goals, objectives, and issues or epics that we're focusing on going towards KubeCon San Diego, which is in the middle of November. So something to note here is the release schedule. So as I mentioned before, we had previously been spending a long time on release cycles. In between 0.2 and 0.3 was about 5 months, and that has a number of shortcomings where we're not getting fixes and improvements and new features into the hands of users very quickly. And it also puts a lot of stress and pressure on each individual release, because if you happen to miss a release with a feature, it'll be months before you get another chance. So what we are doing, as I mentioned before, is improving our release engineering and our release process to add a lot more automation to it, and also just workflow process around it as well, so that we'll be able to do monthly releases. So 0.4, the current milestone that we're working on right now, there's a little bit more discussion to be had about what the exact release date for that, but it's either going to be at the end of this week or the next Friday. And then a following month right after that, the November 15th is right before KubeCon San Diego. So we suspect, or we are planning for 2 releases before we get to KubeCon San Diego with 0.4 and both 0.5 as well. So it'd be very nice to rapidly to get more things in the hands of users a lot more quickly than we were before. All right, so let's move to the community topics section. So Dan, I know you had been doing some work with the folks from Packet on a stack of theirs in integration with Crossplane. Would you like to give us an update on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been working with one of the developers over at Packet, and we're kind of building off the demo that I used to initially kind of like bootstrap the Packet stack. And we're looking at moving that over to their organization so it can be owned and the full life cycle can be controlled by them and that sort of thing. But it's getting pretty close to a state where it could be a potential 0.1 release for that stack. It's pretty, they don't have a lot of stuff exposed by their API, so pretty much just nailing down the bare metal device support should be good enough to have a basic stack that they could be confident in.
That's awesome, and it's good that each one of these individual stacks can have their own independent release schedule, so they can, a 0.1 release can be done at any time, completely decoupled from, a Crossplane 0.4 or 0.5. So that can work on its own schedule and can be made available when it is ready. But it's good to see the development work in progress on that one. I think that's really cool. Dan, you're also, looked like the beginning of this list is a little Dan heavy right here. But you're also working on the Yugabyte and the Rook stack in general, and the Yugabyte and CockroachDB implementations in that stack as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that's going and what we'll be able to see out of that in the next upcoming release?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will have a Rook stack with support for both Yugabyte and Cockroach, and that's just about ready to go. It's been living in a repo on my account, but we now have a stack Rook repo on the Crossplane org. So I'll be submitting a PR to that, and that will support both static and dynamic provisioning of both Cockroach and Yugabyte clusters in any target Kubernetes cluster. So you could provision them if you had the Rook operators running in the same cluster as the Crossplane control cluster. You could use a existing cluster on like GKE or something like that, or like even an on-prem kind of thing, or a cluster that was provisioned by Crossplane with our Kubernetes cluster resource. So there's a lot of flexibility there, which is really nice, opening up a lot of different kind of infrastructure planes, which is cool, and that's enabled by our new Kubernetes provider type, which is part of core Crossplane. So that should be good to go, and we're looking at having some demos around that as well. So basically, having a target cluster where Rook operators are running, you create either a Yugabyte or a Cockroach cluster there. Then you deploy a Kubernetes application alongside that into the same target cluster, which basically consumes that Postgres compatible database. So there should be some cool stuff coming up here for 0.4.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I really like how this, in addition to the various cloud provider environments that have been supported throughout the lifetime of the Crossplane project, this now opens the door to on-premises scenarios as well, which adds just another type of environment and a lot more flexibility into this whole multi-cloud control plane functionality that Crossplane has been working on for a long time, of being able to schedule workloads and provision resources and all sorts of things across not only the public clouds, but also on premises, and then therefore hybrid scenarios as well. Is super exciting.
Hey, Jared, would you like me to just mention InfraCrowd work
Yeah,
with GetLab?
sure, Steve.
Yeah, sure. Happy to announce we've kicked off some work with InfraCloud to accelerate the integration of Crossplane into GitLab as a managed service. It can deploy to your Kubernetes cluster. They've signed up for a rather aggressive integration timeline to get into GitLab's 12.5 release in November. So we'll be doing a kickoff tomorrow. And yeah, excited to see that work come together.
And 12.5 is the November release, Steve?
Yes.
Awesome.
So really it's code freeze November 3rd.
Right, 11th.
So we've basically got a couple of weeks to get that work in and get it into merge requests. But yeah, at the end of it, you should be able to deploy Crossplane and also Postgres as a database managed within that cluster via Crossplane. So yeah.
Yep, that's super exciting. How do you spell InfraCloud? Is it like infrastructure cloud?
Yes, exactly.
Is it one word or two words?
Yes, one word.
Cool name.
That's it.
Very cool. Thanks for driving that initiative, Steve, to be able to find someone to take on that work and be able to start executing on it. That's I think that's a really good opportunity for Crossplane to be able to get in front of a lot of the users of the GitLab platform. So it's a great opportunity, and I'm definitely glad for your effort on getting that staffed and start to execute.
Great.
Cool. So Javad is not on the call this morning, but he had done a fair amount of work recently to update our build logic, build submodule, to use Go modules instead of using other vendoring tools like DEP. We're not going to get too deep into this because it can get a little technical, but I did want to bring up, since it's kind of a new workflow sort of thing for contributors to the Crossplane project, I just wanted to get a couple questions answered here real quick. So for using Go modules now, since that's all the stack repos, I think, have had that merged, and then main Crossplane is about to get that merged as well. Is there any, does anyone on the call know if there is a specific migration step you need to take for an existing locally cloned repo that's already using a vendor directory and already using DEP? Do you have to do anything after you fetch the latest changes to use Go modules?
I know one workflow that would probably be most familiar for anyone who's using DEP is if you use Go mod vendor. So basically just creating a locally vendor directory again, which also can kind of speed up some of the issues with using IDEs with Go modules right now. I'm not sure if Javad, if you run make vendor, if that's still going to run Go mod vendor behind the scenes now. But if not, then if you just run Go mod vendor locally, then you'll have that same familiar directory of dependencies there. And the other make command should work as expected.
And Go mod vendor, is that a sub command of Go mod that does that vendoring functionality excuse me, for you, instead of using like the shared Go modules cache that's at a higher level?
Yep, that's correct.
Interesting.
So if you, and it might even, if you already, since we already have locally vendor directories with DEP, I'm not sure if it might look there, like the general pattern is if you have vendor directories in your local repo, then Go mods will look there first. And that's kind of like the purpose of Go mod vendor. But I don't know if you already have a vendor directory with DEP, if it'll automatically just start looking there. I think it might actually, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Cool. Yeah, my hope is that we're not in a state where we're just kind of reusing what was already there and kind of like in an odd transitional state. I would like it to be a clean migration where the new workflow is commonly used and it's consistent and normalized across everybody. But we will, if I run into any issues with it, then we can follow up on Slack and ask Javad for some guidance or support on getting existing locally cloned repos, fully functional and on the new pattern. Cool. So that was all the issues, our items that I had on the agenda here. Was there any other agenda items that folks wanted to bring up in this context right now? All right. Then if there are no further items for discussion today, then we can go ahead and adjourn. And I will post this, the recording to YouTube as usual on the Crossplane channel. All righty. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.